Lady Swims, to all of the pastors and preachers who are here today, and to all of you, my Father's children. I want you to know that it is indeed a joy and a blessed delight to be in the house today, to have been asked to come and to share in my brother and my friend's 7th pastoral anniversary. I always say that you could have invited anybody, but you were kind enough to invite me, kind enough to invite the Washington Street Church, and we are appreciative, we are grateful for the opportunity to share with you today. We're not going to prolong our time, but we're going to get right into this word, amen? There is a word found for us today in Jeremiah chapter 20, and we want to hang our hats on verses 7, 8, and 9. Jeremiah chapter 20, and verses 7, 8, and 9 from the King James Version and the Message translation will give substance to what I'd like to share this afternoon. Jeremiah chapter 20, verses 7, 8, and 9. If it is your custom to stand, won't you please stand for the reading of the Word of God. Jeremiah chapter 20, verses 7, 8, and 9. It says, O Lord, thou hast deceived me, and I was deceived. Thou art stronger than I, and hast prevailed. I am in derision daily. Everyone mocketh me. For since I spake, I cried out. I cried violence and spoil, because the word of the Lord was made a reproach unto me, and a derision daily. Then I said, I will not make mention of him, nor speak any more of his name. But his word was in my heart, as a burning fire shut up in my bones, and I was weary with forbearing, and I could not stay. But this is how the Message translation says, you pushed me into this, God, and I let you do it. You were too much for me, and now I'm a public joke. They all poke fun at me. Every time I open my mouth, I'm shouting murder or rape, and all I get for my God warnings are insults and contempt. But if I say forget it, no more God messages from me, the words of fire in my belly, a burning in my bones. I'm worn out trying to hold it on in. I can't do it any longer. Then I hear a whispering behind my back. I want to talk just for a few moments about why Pastor Swims didn't quit. Come on. Amen. Why Pastor Swims didn't quit is why every pastor has stayed when they felt like walking away. God of heaven, we come again and we thank you so much for reminding us that we're not just conquerors, but we're more. And so, Father, we pray now that your presence and your power will not only be in us, but that it will speak to us, that your people might be fed. We're so grateful, Lord God, for Pastor Swims and for Lady Brittany for their powerful ministry here in Concord. And we pray now, oh God, that as we seek to encourage this couple, and as we seek to challenge and encourage this congregation and every congregation, that the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart will be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord. You are my strength, and you are my redeemer. Amen. I think the title of this afternoon's message, Why Pastor Swims Did Not Quit, may not sound too spiritual. Because for the average person, it is inconceivable that the man of God or that the woman of God might even have the option of quitting in ministry. After all, God calls a person to ministry, and if he does, it's for life. But I've come to tell you that whether it seems spiritual or not, the reality is that men and women walk away from the ministry every day. Women and men of God either walk away, they are put out, or they burn out. They walk away because they no longer have the energy to stand. They're put out because they do not have the votes to endure. or they are burned out because they have not engaged in self-preservation. The statistics suggest that 91% of ministers know 3 or 4 others who have been forced out of pastoral positions. 1/3 of all pastors serve congregations who either fired the previous minister or actively forced their resignations. At any given time, 75% of pastors in America want to quit. More than 2,000 pastors have leave their ministries each month. In his book, Why Your Pastor Left, Christopher Smith wrote, "The moment after our pastor exited the building that afternoon in 2008, most of the congregation sat in shock. A tiny but powerful minority wore victorious smiles at the minister's ousting. The lady next to me wept. Her pleading question," he says, "kept me awake all night. Why did our pastor have to leave?" And Mr. Schmitz wanted to know that answer as well. Mr. Schmitz concluded that many pastors have been burned out, burned up, or has just plainly been burned by congregations. Now, in all fairness, it is true that some congregations have been burned by fast-talking, charismatic, and uncaring preachers. However, statistics show that many pastors are just misunderstood. They're not allowed to be human. They're not allowed to make mistakes. Their families are held to a higher standard. And quite honestly, the average pastor will tell you that they feel unappreciated. If they preach too short, they're not prepared. If they preach too long, they're not considerate of our time. And it don't take all that. If they try to lead us in worship, then we're putting on a show. Most pastors oftentimes are just misunderstood. Think about this. Pastors often, listen to this, pastors often get no severance package and cannot receive unemployment benefits in the wake of dismissal. Schmitz asserts that one of the problems is that our congregations are full of people who believe that they would make a better leader than the one that God has already called to the hand. Plain and simple, many people want their pastor to become someone else or to become like someone else. Yes, pastoring and yes, preaching is a hard job, and at times it is a thankless job. But the 21st century pastor and preacher is not the first to realize how hard and how thankless this job can become. Come here, Jeremiah. Jeremiah is known as the weeping prophet. He's called the weeping prophet for at least 2 reasons. One, Jeremiah is grieving over the destruction of the people, and he sees what God is going to do to Israel because of their faithlessness. He says in chapter 9 that he wishes his head was a well of water and his eyes a fountain of tears, and he could weep day and night for casualties among his people. As a prophet, Jeremiah did more than just proclaim God's message. He embodied God's message. He saw and he felt what God saw and felt for the people. Secondly, Jeremiah was known as the weeping prophet because in chapters 11 through 20 we find the prayers or the confessions of Jeremiah to God. In these prayers or in these confessions, Jeremiah pours out his heart to God. He expresses his frustration and he expresses his anger. He says, I am faithful, yet I'm persecuted. I am faithful, and the people are plotting against me. In one section, Jeremiah accuses God of being deceptive, having tricked him into ministry. At one point, Jeremiah says, I ain't going to do it no more. At one point, Jeremiah says, I ain't going back to the pulpit no more and speak about you. How many pastors and how many preachers can relate to Jeremiah? How many of us have ever said, I ain't going back no more? Don't make me go back. And our spouses have to say, you have to go back because you're the pastor. How many times have we said, find somebody else to speak your message? Let them talk about it. Let them ridicule somebody else. I can make more money with less stress. I ain't going back. The late Manuel Scott said there were times when he wished he did not have to go to the pulpit, and then after going, he wished he had not gone. But what was it that made Jeremiah go back? What is it that makes every pastor or preacher go back week after week? Will you let me preach a little bit? Week after week, after saying they would not go back, but they keep going back week after week. What is it that has made Pastor Swims give up every morning, every Sunday morning, every Wednesday and every other day and come back after saying, I ain't going back? After saying they ridiculed me too much, they talked about me too much, they laughed at my last message. But what is it that makes all of us who pastor or preach keep getting up? Why didn't Jeremiah quit? And why haven't you quit? May I suggest to you today that the text would suggest that no matter how difficult ministry becomes, we can always tell God. But the good news is that we're never alone. Even though it seems that life and our enemies are getting the best of us, God always has an ear to listen. How many times do we hear David lamenting over his enemies, triumphing over him? How many times have we heard David talking about his enemies getting the best of him? How many times have we heard David talk about his enemies laughing at it? How many times do we see and hear David saying, God, I just want relief? And we even hear Paul asking God 3 times to remove the thorn, and 3 times God says no. And all he says is, my grace is sufficient. If you're hurting today, if you're disappointed, if you're frustrated with life, and if you're frustrated with ministry, if you're about to give up, if you're about to throw in the towel, the good news is you can tell God all about it because he cares. Not only does he care, but he has a plan and a purpose for your pain. The text would suggest that we can tell God because he's never frustrated, and he's never intimidated, and he's never limited by our questions. In the midst of our questions, we will find the greatness of God. If you pastor today, you don't have to say amen. You can just look straight ahead. But some of your members might be here. But God told me to tell you that when it's frustrating, he has an ear to listen. God told me to tell you that when you feel like saying, to hell with all of this, if you never felt that way, then you ain't never pastored before. If you never felt that way, you never had to deal with a bunch of us before. If you never felt that way, you never had to try to get us from point A to point B, because everybody wants to know why we got to go A, why we can't go B. We went C last time. B was a better plan. No, I think F was a better plan. And all you want to do is say, forget it. Y'all figure it out. Y'all do what you want to do. Paul call me later on and tell me what you decided to do. But the good news of the text is God has an ear to listen, and whatever we're going through, whatever frustrates us, we don't have to go through it by ourselves. Here's what I've learned about my questions and sometimes God's silence. I've learned that God can still be trusted even in the midst of my pain. I learned that when people plot and when they lie on you, and they will do it, the good Christian folk will do it. They'll lift their hands in the sanctuary and lie on you on the parking lot. They will do it. I've learned that when people do that, I should pray more. Because the reality is, when I pray, I get better. The rough as it is, as difficult as it becomes, when I pray, I get better. Y'all ain't hearing me. When I pray, then I get better. Y'all still not feeling me. When I pray, then I get better. When I pray, it soothes and it calms my spirit. When I feel like walking away, when I feel like doing something else, when I say, Father, I stretch my hands to thee, for there is no other help that I know. If thou withdraw thyself from me, whither shall I go? When I pray, I get better. Lastly, I've learned that the growth of ministry does not depend on me, nor does it depend on them. And I've learned after a few years that what frustrates me is when I began to take the ministry on as if everything that happens depends on me. Y'all not feeling me? What frustrates me is when I begin to think that if it rises or falls, it depends on me. But can I tell you something, Pastor? It doesn't depend on me, nor does it depend on them. It depends on God. And you and I have to remove the barriers. But what does depend on me is how I change in the midst of everything. That's why Pastor Swims didn't quit, because it changed him. If people don't push us closer to God, and if it does not change us in the midst of it, then we've got some evaluating to do. Secondly, Pastor, I'm not going to get you out of here. Secondly, Pastor Swims did not quit because pastoring or preaching is not a matter of gifts or abilities. Pastoring or preaching is not a matter of gifts or abilities. It's about a calling. Right there. The Jubilee translation says, you seduced me, talking to God, and I was seduced. The Message translation says, you pushed me into this. The Derby translation says, you enticed me and I was taken in. And the New American translation says, you persuaded me. But no matter what the translation, each of them brings the idea that I was minding my own business. I was doing my own thing. I was on a fast track of being a CEO, CFO, or a COO. And preaching was never on my agenda. Y'all not feeling it. Come on. The reason why I didn't quit, and so many others didn't quit, and Pastor Swims has not quit, because it is a calling on our lives. Can Can I tell you that this is not just a job? Right. This is not just something that we do.
That's right. Yes, sir.
The reason everybody else is saying forget you and I'm trying to find you is because it's a call on my life. The reason I'm still here, the reason Pastor Swims is still here and everybody else is still here and others have walked away for far less is because it's a call. And it's not just a job. Can I say something? It's interesting that I'm one of the old guys now because I talk to the young guys. You see, this ministry is not about picking up a check on Sunday. This ministry is not just building a big house. This ministry is not just about preaching the house down on Sunday. Because the reality is preaching on Sunday is a small portion of what I do from Sunday to Sunday. And so you see, we often see with the bottom line is every preacher that I know, they would keep pastoring whether they got a check or not. The reality is you can pay me or not pay me, but I'm going to still pastor because it's not just a job, it's my calling. The reason why we keep going back and keep going over, they lie on us and ridicule us and talk about us and laugh about us and say what we should have done, what we should not have done, who we should have had close to us and who we should have pushed away from us, but yet we keep on coming, staggering and sometimes tripping and falling because we know that God has placed a call on our lives, and if we don't preach, it won't get done. That's not an arrogant statement. It's a call. But here's where the problem comes. Some just win. Here's where the problem comes. Some just went for the big church. Some just went for the six-figure salary. Some just went for the smooth car. Some just went for community respectability. They wanted prestige and they wanted recognition. And when it does not go the way they think it should go, is they pick up and they leave looking for the next big congregation and the next big salary and the next big house and the next big mansion. And as some have said, that they have gone to a place where their character can no longer sustain them. And so their blunders, their fleshly pursuits sometimes makes it difficult for those who understand it's a calling on their lives. You don't have to put them in a big house. You don't have to give them a smooth car. You don't have to give them a six-figure salary. You don't have to have a big conference room, pastor's room, bathroom. You don't have to have none of that. And we are going to go back every week and tell the story of a Savior who loves their hell-bound souls so. I know this is not an anniversary message, but I'm just trying to help us. And the truth of the matter is that God never promised that this journey would be problem-free. God never promised that this journey would be easy. God never said that we would all get the six-figure salaries. God never intended for all of us to be on the big stage preaching to thousands. God just chose some of us to be faithful where we are. If it ain't but 6 or 60 or 600, God chose us to be faithful where we are. Y'all not hearing what I'm trying to say? God did not say, when I stop and think about it, God did not say that everybody would love us. He did not say that everybody would respect us.
Yes, sir.
Can I tell somebody something? Don't get mad at me. Pastors, preachers who are in the house, people who do ministry, ministry is not for wimps. preaching to 6 or 60, 600 or 6,000, it ain't for wimps. If you cannot stand, if you cannot withstand criticism, it ain't for wimps. If you're always looking for a way out, it ain't for wimps. If you're always looking to try to pass the buck to somebody else, it's not for wimps. Real talk, real talk. Because our calling will often bring ridicule. And when we have been faithful in ministry, trouble will automatically come.
Yes, sir.
And that trouble will often make us question our calling. Sometimes trouble will make us question our ministry. Can I tell you, Pastor Swims, your ministry is important to this community. But more importantly, can I give you real talk? It's not what your ministry is doing in Carbondale. It's what the ministry is doing in you. And as we serve God, our capacity for ministry should increase and enable us to do more, even though we sometimes don't feel like it. I came to tell you this, and I'm almost done. Cry if you must. Lament if you must. Fuss if you must. But when the dust settles, we have no other option but to get back up in the strength of the Lord. We haven't quit because it's our calling. You see, and people don't understand, Pastor Swims. They think because it is our calling, we do it and we make it look easy. I'm not trying to be arrogant. We make it look easy. And the reality is, it's not easy. The reality is that we give our best sometimes, and you, some folks, don't appreciate it. And you know, I can walk out of our church and I can count on my hands sometimes how many people said, "Good message, Pastor." I can preach and sweat be all, my clothes be wet. And folk will sometimes walk out the side door to keep from coming to help and say, "Hello, Pastor." And you know what we do as idiots sometimes? We miss the folk who say, "Good job." And we focus on the Negroes who don't say nothing about our job. It's not an easy job.
Yes, sir.
And if you're in leadership, expect ridicule.
Yes, sir.
Expect criticism. Expect folk to like you as long as you're saying what they want you to say. Expect people to pat you on the back as long as you tell them, "Ain't it all right?" But when you tell people that they're going to die and burn in hell if they don't get their lives right, then they're ready to leave the church because they want to hear some good news. Well, I just gave you good news. If you get your life right, you ain't going to hell.
You help me, sir.
In the final instance, Jeremiah says in the final instance, "I ain't preaching no more." Can I tell you something? A whole lot of folk could care less if we preached or not. Can I tell you this? On April Fool's, there was Easter Sunday morning at Washington Street Church. I'm a jokester. I like to have fun. So I got up. I mean, it was hard to praise team sing. Folk was kind of like, ain't moved, ain't done nothing. And so I got up and I said, "I know the hour's growing late and I know you want to get home to your families. And after this last selection, we're going to go home." Boy, they shouted all over the place. I said, "April Fools." shout before. And the reality is, people really don't want to hear God's word. I know it doesn't sound spiritual, I know it doesn't sound real or right or true, but it's reality. People want to hear a 15-minute sermon on how to have a good life or a well or adjusted personality. We spend hours preparing for what is usually 15 or 20 minutes. But at Washington Street, I go ahead and do 45 or 50. Because shepherd knows his sheep. And you got to be careful, pastors, put you in here, because only preacherettes preach sermonettes, and sermonettes produce Christianettes. The reality is, people would rather come hear a concert. And they'll take 15 minutes of the word if it tells them how good and how wonderful they are. But they don't want to hear the word if it accuses them or if it tells them something about their life that they have to change. If there's no challenge, we ain't trying to get it. If there's no life change, we ain't wanting it. He ought to preach better sermons, and he ought to encourage us more. And that's the problem. We've been encouraged too much. We've been told how good we are, how wonderful we are, and we are good, and we are wonderful, but we have become comfortable, and therefore we don't think God requires anything else from us. But look at the text. Jeremiah was so ticked off, he said, I ain't going back. You can't make me go back. They don't want to hear what I have to say. But here it is in the text. If we don't preach, if we don't tell the story, people won't know. I remember, Pat, over 20-some years ago, my oldest daughter, Rihanna, who's now 27 years old, I was getting ready for church one Sunday, and she came and she was just beginning to talk, and she said, Daddy, are you going to church? I said, yes, I'm going to church. She said, are you going to church to preach? I said, yes, I am going to church to preach. And then she asked the question, Daddy, why do you preach? And that's the question that every pastor and every preacher must ask and answer honestly. Why do we keep going back and they don't want to hear us? Why do we keep preaching when people live their lives as if we've never preached? Why do we keep mounting the pulpit when people still don't believe our story? And the reality is that I cannot help but preach. Pastor Swims and every preacher in here can't help but preach. If we preach, the sinner will be saved. If we preach, the backslider will be reclaimed. If we preach, the pimp will become a preacher. If we preach, the lottery will languish. If we preach, the liar will become a lover of the Lord. If we preach, the 40 ounce will become a communion cup. If we preach, the prostitute will become a choir member. The reason I didn't quit, and the reason Pastor Swims didn't quit, and the reason every preacher in this house keeps on preaching Sunday after Sunday is because it's like fire shut up in our bones. We've got a story to tell. We've got some folk that need to be saved. And if we get caught up in our faith feelings, if we get caught up in our feelings, if we down. I don't care how good they think they are. They'll die and go to hell. We've got to keep getting up Sunday after Sunday, telling a dying world that they hung him high, they stretched him wide, and for me he died. But that's not how the story is. 3 days later, he rose again. And that's what gets me excited. If they believe it or not, I get to tell a story about a Savior who loves you so. The reason why we don't quit, we can tell God it's our calling, and it's like fire shut up in my bones. Out of me now and then, I get a bad taste of the can't help it. I can't help but talk about my Jesus. I can't help but talk about my Savior. I can't help but tell somebody He rose again. I don't know how you feel about it, but I can't help it. They'll make you go home, and they'll make you cry. They'll make you go home and wish you had never stood. They'll make you go home and wish you had another career. But when the dust settles, we go back one more time and tell the story. God bless you. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.